Migraine Monkey here. Today I'm going to be explaining how carbohydrates are transported from the small intestine to the blood, 4 ways you can improve this transportation and the adaptations that occur, is table sugar as good as expensive sports specific products, how does this benefit your cycling performance. Transportation of carbohydrates from the small intestines to the blood takes place in enterocytes, which are the cells in the lining of the intestines. After the carbohydrates have been digested into the simple sugars glucose and fructose, they are transported into the cell. Glucose is transported by SGLT1, whilst fructose is transported by GLUT5. Some of the glucose will be used by the cell for its own metabolism, then glucose and fructose are transported out of the cell into portal blood, mostly by GLUT2. You can improve this transportation, i.e. train your gut, in a few different ways. The first way is by eating a high carbohydrate diet when you are not training. I would classify high carbohydrate as anything above 8 grams carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight, but obviously any increase above what you are currently eating would go towards signaling and adaptation. The next way is to increase your carbohydrate consumption whilst riding. For example, if you currently consume 30 grams of carbs per hour of riding, on your next ride you could try 40 grams of carbs per hour and then keep adding 10 grams per hour each time you ride.
But wait, why can't I just jump straight to 150 grams per hour?
Well, if you go beyond what your gut is currently capable of, you can get something that I like to call carb belly, which some of you may have experienced before. The discomfort you feel with carb belly is caused by these transporters being overwhelmed, and therefore the sugars will remain in the lumen of the small intestine and retain water. This can cause bloating or cramping. The discomfort is quite hard to describe. For me personally, I would say it's quite a sharp tingling sensation in my abdomen. It's not that painful, it's just a bit annoying, but I did actually quite like it because it meant I knew where my new absorption limit was. Like with all training, it does take time to adapt. Don't just quit trying when you get carb belly for the first time. However, I did find the gut is quite quick to respond. I can't remember the last time I experienced carb belly, and sometimes I will be having over 120 grams of carbs per hour. So this leads me to believe I'm not overwhelming the transporters at all, even at that high of an hourly rate. So what actually are the adaptations taking place to allow greater transportation across this membrane? They are an increase in the density and efficiency of these transporter proteins. Therefore, more glucose and fructose can be moved into the cell within a set time period. Now you have widened the bottleneck. Interestingly, high dietary fat and low carbohydrate intake can reduce the density of these transporters by silencing the transcription of SGLT1, i.e. the transporter isn't being manufactured by the cell as frequently. This is the opposite of what we are looking for, resulting in a narrowing of the bottleneck. Another way to ensure maximum absorption rates whilst minimizing gut discomfort is to ensure you are consuming the right amount of water and sodium. The ideal amount of water intake will provide optimum functioning of the cells and stimulate the uptake of the carbohydrates. Similarly, adequate amounts of sodium in the lumen are required for the stimulation and function of the SGLT1 transporter. SGLT1 stands for sodium glucose transporter. It is a symporter, meaning it needs sodium in order to transport glucose into the cell. However, too much sodium is very bad for performance as it leads to dehydration. A little amount often goes a long way. It's hard for me to give general recommendations on how much sodium per milliliter of water to put in your bottles because it depends on multiple factors. The internal ones being individual difference in sweat rate and sweat content. The external ones being things like intensity of the ride, temperature, humidity, duration, etc. For these reasons, it will always be harder to keep your gut transportation optimized on hotter days, and you'll be more likely to suffer gut discomfort. To summarize the steps you can take to improve this transportation: higher intake of carbohydrates in the diet, gradual increase in carbs per hour whilst training, avoid excessive amounts of dietary fat with low carbohydrate intake, try to ensure optimal levels of water and sodium. The main advertisement I see for sports-specific carbohydrate products such as gels and powder mixes are they have the correct ratio of maltodextrin, glucose to fructose. This does have some merit, as using just maltodextrin or glucose alone would mean we wouldn't be able to make use of the GLUT2 transporter on the apical membrane. The ratios they usually state have a higher quantity of glucose than fructose. This also has merit, as the GLUT2 transporter is less efficient than the SGLT1 transporter and can more easily become overwhelmed, leading to carb belly. Sometimes they will also use maltodextrin instead of glucose, with the argument that it has a lower osmolarity than glucose and therefore has a faster rate of gastric emptying and reaches the small intestine sooner. This is also true, but the rate of gastric emptying is much more determined by total carbohydrate content of the solution.
These products sound mega. Sign me up.
Obviously, most of the top brands' products are good and well researched, but is table sugar just as good? Table sugar is sucrose, which has a ratio of 1:1 glucose to fructose. This is close to the ideal ratio that sport companies are marketing. As I previously mentioned, I have been able to reach over 120 grams per hour with no gut discomfort, and this was with white granulated sugar. Therefore, I think that the sport-specific products are only very marginally better than white granulated sugar, maybe not even a detectable difference. The biggest boost would have come from a placebo benefit. However, this will be dampened now that I have told you it's not that much better. If you want to do your day-to-day gut training on your normal rides with table sugar and then use your more expensive products for target events / efforts, then that would work too. But just remember to always try anything new in training before racing. There's also the matter of personal preference in things like taste, and also if you prefer consuming solid foods. Table sugar is a great alternative to expensive sport-specific products, so don't feel like you are missing out if you can't afford them. Always try new fueling strategies in training before target events. The body is good at adapting. The biggest boost comes from training your gut, not looking for a special product. Put simply, having more glucose in the blood will mean that your muscle glycogen is used up at a slower rate. This will mean you can maintain higher power for longer at a lower RPE. There are additional countless benefits to being able to tolerate more carbohydrates per hour. Here are some of the main ones. The ride will feel easier. For example, say this ape does a training ride of 2.5 hours at 75% of FTP and consumes 20 grams of carbs per hour. Now the same ape does a different training ride of 78% of FTP for 3 hours and consumes 60 grams of carbs per hour. The second ride will feel significantly easier, whilst also giving him way more adaptation signaling. The tired, lethargic feeling you have after a ride you have done when you don't fuel properly does not mean you are getting more fitness adaptations. You'll find you can create more training stimulus on intensity days. The higher carbohydrate intake will likely mean that you are able to complete an extra rep or more on a set of intervals. Your recovery from the ride will be faster. Perhaps most importantly, you are far less likely to develop overtraining syndrome or relative energy deficiency in sport. And finally, your mood and energy levels post-ride will be a lot better, which will help you out in other aspects of life.